Hello and welcome to my channel. I just thought that I would share with you a little bit about grading a project. Now, I did receive a question about this a little while ago, and I just haven't had the time or the opportunity to film this, but here we are. So, also, I mean, if you have been stitching for quite a while, you probably already have your way of doing things. And I don't know, I just thought that I would share this. So maybe if you're a bit new and don't know really how to approach grading or stuff like that, maybe you can find a little bit of inspiration. Or not. This is just the way how I do it and what makes sense to me. So there is no right way or a wrong way to do anything when it comes to stitching or your craft or whatever. You just try different things until you find what works for you. And when it comes to grading, for me it's all about my brain. I don't like counting when I stitch, which is why I always grid. Nowadays, I have tried different things in the past. Okay, the bad thing about grading is that it takes time, of course. So when you get started on a project, you have your flaws, you have your fabric, you just want to get started, right? And then taking like a day or two to just grid before you get to start stitching might seem a bit redundant or just boring, and maybe you don't want to deal with that. I have tried several times on several different projects and on different fabrics to just get started, and it never works for me because I get lost, I miscount, and especially now when I have several whips. Before, when I was monogamous, I could sort of make it work because you are sticking with the one project. You kind of remember where you leave things off, and when you need to remember, okay, yeah, I did leave that stitch there, yada yada yada. Now that I have several whips, it's more important than ever that I grid, just for the ease of it, so you don't have to spend time when you pick up a project. Then now I don't have to spend that much time to get back into it, because I could just count. I know the lines, I have the numbers, and I have the numbers on the chart, and I go, oh, okay, this is where I am. Some people can keep that all in their head anyways, and they think it's no problem to just count and do everything like that in their head without the grid, and that's fine. But like I said, my brain can't do it. Well, it can, but it takes more time counting and less time stitching, which is why I grid and why I stick with gridding. Because once I get started on a project and when I start stitching, for me, one part of stitching is it really relaxes me, and it sort of takes my mind somewhere else. And the more time I get to just stitch and get into the rhythm of it, the more enjoyable it is for me. So anything that can just remove all the other things, like counting, is just worth so much more to me. And also I find that on like a little bit of a bigger project, yes, it takes time to grid, but you sort of gain that time back while stitching, because you don't have to spend as much time while you stitch to count. So yeah, for me, I think actually I do gain a lot more time by gridding. So you just have to try and find your own way through this, I think. But anyways, So what I do is I mainly stitch on Aida or even weave, and I do approach it a bit differently. Aida is super easy and super fast to grid because of the holes in the corners of the square, and yeah, hang on. Yeah, so what I do is actually with Aida, even with bigger projects, I always find the middle. And with Aida it's also easy because it's a little bit stiffer, and you can just fold it in half and then fold it in half, and then you find the middle, and you find the middle, so it's easy, so you know where you are. And then you just have to, and as you can see, the middle is in the middle of one square. So all you've got to do then is just count. You can read on top of your chart. This is a paper chart, so it's just, you could just go to the last page and you know how far to go. And what I do first is I always do this line and that line. Now, on some projects I do this and then the middle line, but since this sort of the middle of the project is sort of in the middle of in between here, I did choose to start on top, so I had to count. But when I do this line I count, and when I do this line I count, and I count several times to make sure that it's 10 by 10 by 10 and 10 10 10. Once you've done that, or once I've done that, I have this line and I have that line, and all I do is I take my ruler, actually I put it like there, or actually I put it like so I can see, and then I just mark it off at every section. So it's super fast. Spend a little bit more time to get a horizontal line and a vertical line super correct, so I probably count this at least 2 or 3 times, so I know I have that, because then I don't have to count. For the rest of the gridding I just mark and follow the ruler, which saves a little bit of time. I'll use the friction pens. They have this ink that disappears with heat, so you can use, like I have done, I think on camera, a hair dryer. You can wash it in warmish water, and you can use an iron to just get rid of this ink. I don't know, can you see that? I prefer the small nib when it comes to 16, 18 or 20 count Aida. Sometimes when you have 11 or 14 count you can get away with a slightly, I don't know if you can see that, a slightly bigger nib, sorry. It's 0.7, and I also have this is 0.5, and this one is actually also 0.5, I think. Yeah, so I like these. There are some people that I've seen that I use some sort of graphite, which is also fine. I just think that the graphite smudges a bit. I prefer this one because even if it does smudge, which it rarely does, but if it would, it will go away. You don't have to worry about it, actually. So I prefer to grid with these pens, unless I work on a project with black Aida, which I will show you. Now, on the black fabric, I'm sure that you can find a pen with ink, a friction pen with ink that shows up on black fabric. I don't really want to do that, and since I don't really stitch on black fabric that often, I do use this type of thread. Now I'm not sure actually what this is called. I bought this thread so long ago. It is not super easy to work with, but it does get the job done. It is a bit stretchy and it's a bit tangly, and it's more like a sort of ribbon thing, and as you can see it tends to curl if you pull on it too hard, which makes it kind of annoying to work with when you grid, but it is quite efficient to use on the black fabric. Now again, this is Aida. I start from the middle, so I have folded this fabric up. I found the middle and then I start gridding. Now, I don't know, yeah, I think you can see that. Now when you grid with thread, some people, because I went this way, right? And you can also go this way, and you can make sure that you stitch so you get the whole square, even the bottom and the top, with the thread. So you draw out the whole square, which means that you have to stitch this way too, and you have to do it twice because you go up and down with a thread, or you do like a back stitching kind of thing. Now I don't really feel a need to do that, so I only go one way because I just want to get the corners, and this also saves me time. But then again, you have to find your way with this, because some people I've seen do prefer, even with the thread, to like stitch the whole way around to get the whole square, and that's fine. It just takes a little bit more time, and I prefer not to. So again, you just need to try and find your way with this. Now when it comes to even weave, I actually treat that differently, especially, well, actually both on small and big projects, it doesn't matter. But even weave, it's a bit, for me it's different. It doesn't behave the same as an Aida does, and it's not as easy to count and to grid. So what I always do, and this takes a little bit more effort, no, I wouldn't say effort, but you need to be careful when you count. I always start in the upper left corner, so I don't find the middle here. Even if it's just would be like this project, I just find the upper left corner. That means you have to decide your border first. I choose, this is I think 3 inches, so I measured out 3 inches here, and then I took the ruler and measured out 3 inches here, and then I found my corner here. Now this takes counting and double checking yourself like way in advance, so you know. And since I do not grid the whole project at once, so you know that once you get to the other side you still have fabric left, right? So you haven't miscalculated and you end up finishing your project over here. There are apps for that, I know, but you can also just count, because you do have the stitch count, especially on the, I think on almost every chart that I've seen, you always have the stitch count, so you know how many stitches you have across and down. I also give myself like a couple of inches, no more than that, I would say, like 6 inches extra, just to make sure that I have enough on the end and on the bottom. So yeah, that is how I do it. But so here what I do is I start on the top, I count and I count and I count super, like 2, 3, 4, 5 times if I have to get the line up here, and then I count, do the same. I mark out every 10 stitches down here, and then I don't use the ruler here, but I go down row by row and mark it off, so I don't count, and follow like all the way down, so I don't have to count every cross. And again, it's a preference also if you want to grid the whole project at once. Please feel free to do that. Like on this big project though, I did see a woman on YouTube, and she gridded, I think, a huge project all at once before she even got started, and wow, yeah, and I think that would have taken her like days and days. I prefer to do it just a little bit at a time. It sort of also works a little bit as a, I would say maybe a carrot, like something to strive for. So I know that, ooh, once I get here, then I take a pause on stitching, and then I grid. And once I grid, I reward, and then of course the reward is I get to continue stitching, and yeah, so it gives me somewhere to aim for and somewhere to go to. So I prefer that. But again, if you prefer to have everything set up from the beginning before you even start stitching, then of course that's fine. Now most charts are marked 10 by 10, but there are charts like the one that I have from Lanarte, which is, the chart is actually gridded 5 by 5, and that is also fine. I did start this chart by gridding it 10 by 10, and this is stitch 2 over 2. So I did start by gridding it 10 by 10. What ended up happening in my head is that I would then confuse the grid line that I had on the fabric with the line on the chart. So I did end up having to frog several times down here on our face, and then I just decided, no, enough of that, as you can see. So I started here by then just gridding 5 by 5 instead, so that it would be easier to just look up at the chart and just find the line, and then yeah, it was just easier for me. Again, if you are a person who has an easy time of keeping count and always knowing where you are, then you probably don't need to be this detailed. You could probably maybe not grid at all, or maybe grid 10 by 10. For me, that didn't work, so I grid this project 5 by 5, but that's the only project that I'm doing that with. Yeah, and that is how I do it. So hopefully maybe you get some inspiration or some tips, or maybe if you haven't tried grid before, maybe give it a go, and watch more floss tubers on how they prep their projects, because this is the way I have done it with all of my stitching. Is I've taken a little bit from everywhere. It's really nice to watch a lot of videos, a lot of floss tubes, and you just pick and choose whatever fits you the best. Try stuff out, and maybe in the end you do find your own way through this, because there's no, as I said before, and as many other floss tube also says, of course, is that there is no right, there is no wrong. It's just your way and your preference. So at least I hope this was a little bit of help to you, and I also hope to see you in the next one. Thank you so much. Take care of yourself. Bye.